In 2017, we brought you the first part of Cold Case, a documentary that investigated the environmental, economic and social impact of the yet-to-be-constructed Lamu Coal Power Plant. That first part heavily explored the concerns by civil society groups and environmentalists regarding the project's impact on human health and the environment. In this second part, we take a look at the economics of power generation in Kenya. Why are proponents championing for the addition of coal-fired power to Kenya's energy mix? The technology to be used, the ultra-supercritical technology, is a first of its kind in Africa. Does this change the narrative?
Diversification of our mix is critically important because that is the only way you can guarantee reliable, adequate, and sustainable power.
The clean coal projects generally are acceptable internationally.
The technology we'll employ there will also, go very far into reducing up to 99% of those other pollutants.
We're in full compliance with those kinds of limits, and therefore we don't see the reason as to why people would be concerned with respect to the health of the populations.
Na kama kuna watu wasema sijui kuna sumu zitakuja, mimi I believe kama kijana hakuna sumu zaidi ya drugs. Mbona watu hawajasema vijana wanakufa kwa sababu ya drugs?
We are talking about the tariff of below 8 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's a matter of making a choice. Would you prefer to remain backward because of so-called perceived, not even proven, serious environmental issues?
There has been sustained arguments around the 1,050 megawatt coal-fired plant to be set up in Lamu. The main bone of contention being possible environmental and health impact of the project. Let's examine this comprehensively. Coal produces energy when it's burnt in a boiler to produce steam. The steam, which is produced under tremendous pressure, flows into a turbine. The turbine then spins a generator to create electricity. A number of gases and compounds are emitted when coal is burnt. The emissions that cause environmental and human concern are sulfur oxides or SOx, nitrogen oxides and NOx, and fine particle ash. These emissions are the legitimate concerns raised by those opposed to the coal project.
Hatutaki huo mradi wa excellency mpaka mambo yawekwe kama kawaida.
Katiba article 42 imesema kwamba kila mtu ana haki ya kuishi katika mazingira safi katika hali ya sasa ya present and for the future generation.
The government, which is the procuring entity of the project, has consistently assured Kenyans that the project will make use of clean coal technology, which is technology that removes or reduces harmful emissions to the atmosphere.
Na sisi hapana wanyama, sisi ni binadamu bwana. Hatuwezi kuleta kitu hapa ambayo itakuja kuumiza watoto wa hapa, kwa sababu watoto wa hapa ni watoto wa Kenya. Ama kuharibu biashara, ama kuharibu mazingira.
That is an issue that need to be looked at more comprehensively rather than just emotionally. And you know that in those other countries, they exist, not just one plant. There are several plants. So the clean coal projects generally are acceptable internationally. So this is what we need to debate. What kind of system are they putting up in Lamu?
What is yet to be debunked is how exactly the clean coal technology to be used on the Lamu Coal project works. What are its mitigation measures and what is the level of its efficiency? Sanjay Gandhi, an environmental specialist involved in the environmental and social impact assessment of the project, says it all starts with the quality of raw material used, the coal itself.
A coal power plant requires a boiler to heat the steam turbine. The raw material is obviously coal. The determinant aspect as far as coal is concerned is the specification. If you have a good specification coal, which doesn't have impurities in it, for example, sulfur, or has very low levels of sulfur, then that input, when it gets burned, what comes out in the output has a much lower emission.
In May 2018, a subsidiary of American conglomerate General Electric acquired a stake in Lamu Power, the consortium driving the project. The deal will see the coal plant use GE's ultra-supercritical clean coal technology. The technology has 3 design aspects meant to treat the emissions and rid them of harmful pollutants. The 3 are low NOx burner, electrostatic precipitator, and wet flue gas desulfurization system.
We're using what we call low nitrous oxide burners, which enable us to have complete combustion of the coal, which will be introduced into the boiler. That's the first clean coal technology that we're putting in place. The second clean coal technology is what we call electrostatic precipitators. The electrostatic precipitators are meant to remove the particulate matter, which, if it wasn't removed, could cause environmental health implications on populations. So the efficiency of this particular unit that we're going to be installing, or the proponent's going to be installing, is going to have an efficiency of almost 99.9%. In other words, the removal of those particulate matters will be to that level. The third clean coal technology that's being put in place is what we call a wet flue gas desulfurization system. So for all the sulfur oxides that may be present in the coal as a result of the combustion process, will be extracted through that wet flue gas desulfurization unit, and each particular boiler, because we have 3 boilers, each boiler is going to have its own unit. The efficiency that is guaranteed is over 95% removal.
Based in South Africa, George Njenga is the regional executive for Sub-Saharan Africa at GE Power.
Generally, when we talk about clean coal technology, it's not just about the CO2, it's also about the SOx, with the sulfur oxide, the NOx, the nitrogen oxide, and particles that is seen as dust. So the technology we'll employ there will also, go very far into reducing up to 99% of those other pollutants, the NOx, SOx, and particles. Local communities usually are concerned about, the local pollutants, the SOx and NOx, and the dust that affect visibility, that bring the phenomenon of acid rain, and so on and so forth. And in Lamu, there's some nice tourism resorts, so people around there will be concerned about fallout from plant. So we employ technology that goes a long way into ensuring you literally go up to 99% and above in eliminating those things that will be locally disturbing to the community and to the environment.
Just to get it right, what then will be the composition of what is finally emitted from the process? Does it mean it's completely harmless?
What we did as the Environment and Social Impact Assessment consultants, we carried out modeling to be able to determine what levels of pollutants would be emitted finally after all the treatment was done. And we actually found that based on supercritical technology, which is what we modeled this power plant on, with respect to air quality, we're able to be at very minuscule levels compared to the standards that either the World Bank has issued or the Kenyan air quality regulations have in place, or even the World Health Organization guidelines.
The International Finance Corporation's environmental standards limits nitrogen oxide emissions to 510 milligrams per cubic meter. Kenya's air quality regulation limits this to the same standard. Now, using a supercritical technology, NOxes are emitted at a level of 450 milligrams per cubic meter, which is lower than standards stipulated by both regulations. Ultra-supercritical technology emits NOxes at a similar level of 450 milligrams per cubic meter. When it comes to sulfur oxides, IFC limits its emissions to 850 milligrams per cubic meter. Kenya's regulation is more lenient on this, limiting the emissions of SOxes to 1,500 milligrams per cubic meter. Now get this, using a supercritical technology, SOxes emitted are less than 350 milligrams per cubic meter, way below the regulatory threshold. It's even lower with the ultra-supercritical technology, which will see SOx's emitted at 200 milligrams per cubic meter. For particulate matter, both the IFC and Kenya's air quality regulation limits this to 50 milligrams per cubic meter. A supercritical technology emits particulate matter at this limit, whereas an ultra-supercritical technology emits lower than this threshold at 30 milligrams per cubic meter. The project's ESIS study further indicates that the use of the USC technology will see a reduction of the plant's carbon dioxide emissions by approximately 512,000 tons annually. Now, here's a twist that seems to have completely missed from this all-important conversation concerning air pollution in Kenya: biomass. Biomass refers to wood, crops, seaweed, and animal wastes that can be used as an energy source. Biomass provides approximately 70% of Kenya's national energy needs and 90% of Kenya's rural energy needs in the form of charcoal and firewood. This is according to the Energy Regulatory Commission. This heavy dependence on firewood and charcoal in Kenya poses a big threat to the environment.
If indeed we are looking at emissions, it is important that we categorize developing countries and developed countries separately. For one reason, that if you look at our state of affairs in this country, at the moment, most of our people are using biomass. They are burning wood to make fire for their heating in the evening and for their cooking. And this biomass-based fire is just next to them. They are breathing the emissions. This biomass itself is unsafe, it's unhealthy to them, and it is just within. It is a worse emission than just one single coal plant put somewhere where you can mitigate the emissions, and which is very far from most of the people anyway, rather than having so many biomass fires spread all over the country. And if you take the sum total of all those fires, it is a much worse emission than an emission, a very minimal emission, from a technologically mitigated coal plant in one spot.
About 57% of firewood is from unsustainable supplies, resulting in Kenya having a national forest cover of just 6% that is estimated to be declining at a rate of 52,000 hectares per year. Shying away from clean coal production as the country chokes up in biomass pollution can be regarded as a case of the pot calling the kettle black, almost literally. According to the Economic and Social Impact Assessment study for the project, energy produced by the Lamu coal-fired power plant will be enough to offset nearly 3.32 million households' dependence on biomass. Each household is estimated to have an average of 5 people. The study contemplates that this will end up alleviating harmful effects of deforestation, carbon emissions, respiratory diseases, and mortality in children and women as a result of biomass dependence.
Let's take time. Tujiulize maswali, tutafute ukweli, tukubaliane, halafu tuendelee na kujenga Kenya hii. Hatuwezi kuwa ndio wenye kuweka vikwazo kwenye mambo ambayo inatupeleka maendeleo mbele.
On the other hand, the whole world is talking about clean, renewable energy, with the 2015 Paris Agreement being a critical turning point towards creating a climate-resilient world. The agreement aims to keep global temperatures well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times and endeavors to limit them even more to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The agreement also aims to limit the amount of greenhouse gases emitted by human activity to the same levels that trees, soil, and oceans can absorb naturally, what is called a net zero emission by 2050. Kenya is party to this agreement and has boundless quantities of renewable energy. It is estimated conservatively that the Kenya Rift has a potential of greater than 2,000 megawatts of geothermal power. So, why is it necessary to add coal, even if clean, to Kenya's energy mix?
It's one of the mix that we see as bringing down the cost of power, particularly because we expect by the time we are bringing in that coal plant, there will be quite an appetite and there quite some demand, whereby we will be able to use it as a base load. And when we use the coal plant as a base load, that means we are almost using it throughout. The cost significantly comes down because the fixed costs are distributed on very many units of electricity that we will be producing. So it is really not true that we are doing the wrong thing.
So what do you say to antagonists who say that really there's no clean coal and that, you know, the use of coal energy is or should be a thing of the past?
You know, I think maybe I would divert this conversation in a different direction and just say, look, why is there a justification for using different technologies for power generation, right? So, and there are many dimensions of approaching it. The first dimension, I think, which is critical, especially in our case in Kenya and certainly in many parts of the world, is energy security. It's an issue of stability in the grid that ensures you have, security of supply, and it's a mitigant against over-reliance of one type. We see countries who, for example, import gas or diesel, countries such as Kenya, when there are global situations that make prices spike up, the exchange rate change, they get vulnerable. So countries across the world must look at what's their energy security strategy and how do they diversify their sources of energy to ensure there's a balance.
In the same breath, countries such as Germany, Malaysia, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates, who also ratified the Paris Agreement, have recently commissioned new coal power plants using General Electric's USC technology. Germany, for instance, is currently operating a USC coal power plant at the highest efficiency in the world at 47.5%. The current average global efficiency of coal-fired power plants is 33%. High-efficiency coal-fired power plants employ high temperature and pressure to reduce the amount of coal needed to produce energy. This, in effect, lowers carbon dioxide emissions from coal combustion that are released into the atmosphere. The coal power plant to be built in Lamu will operate at an efficiency of 43%, which is way above the recorded global average, making it the first of its kind and the most efficient plant in Africa.
41% of all global power, including US, China, Europe, Germany itself, and South Africa, where I'm based, is using coal technologies.
Renewable energy is not cheap either, and for one simple reason: they are fundamentally unreliable in nature. Both solar and wind produce too much energy when societies don't need it, and not enough when they do. For example, peak demand for electricity in households is from about 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. when families are at home. At this time, the sun is not shining. Solar and wind thus require that other forms of energy be on standby to instantly pick up when the wind stops blowing and the sun stops shining.
It has been demonstrated. Places where they have maximum wind and solar penetration: Germany, Denmark, California, despite prices of solar photovoltaics dropping, for example, by 75%, and wind turbine prices falling by 50%, overall prices of electricity have gone up. And the reason is because as you develop more solar and you channel more energy, similarly, you require to have a backup system, be it coal, gas-fired, or hydro. In Kenya now, the hydro bit is almost out unless you go for micro. And again, they have seasonality. When there's drought, they channel very little power. And even the Seven Forks, when there's drought, you have seen Masinga at times almost empty.
The Ministry of Energy's least cost power development plan shows that when put against other sources of power in Kenya, coal power would be the cheapest after hydropower. Hydropower has been unreliable due to periods of drought in the country. Manufacturing and industry are some of the key pillars of Kenya's Vision 2030, a blueprint aimed at transforming Kenya into a newly industrializing and middle-income country that will provide a high quality of life to all of its citizens. However, Kenya is struggling to make steps towards achieving this vision. Some of the challenges include inadequate power supply and stiff industrial competition where foreign industries produce similar products as local ones but at much cheaper prices. The Lamu Coal Power Plant, which would have a lifetime of between 25 to 30 years, is seen as a key enabler of Vision 2030.
There are targets around retiring coal plant by the year 2050. 2050 is another 30-something years. For countries like, is more than half the time countries like Kenya have been independent from colonialism. And they're still grappling with basic things of food security, of energy security, of industrialization, of jobs. Now, how do you tackle those social challenges without looking at the convergence of your development goals from industrialization and so on, and your social goals in terms of lifting people from poverty? And it's always a delicate balance that requires a multi-stakeholder approach. Technology companies like GE provide technologies that customers like AMU make a choice on, right? And governments like a Kenyan government or South African government, once they've understood what they want socially, economically, they say, then what are our best options from a technology standpoint? That's where GE comes in, and that's where OEMs like us come in to provide solutions that address both developmental goals as well as social goals.
Energy-intensive activities such as mining, irrigation of large tracts of land for food security, such as the Galana Kulalu project, operation of petroleum pipelines, electrification of the SGR, the special economic zones, and a growing middle class with people having more equipment are bound to sharply raise the demand for energy.
Energy is, we call it an enabler. It is a catalyst for socio-economic development. If we really are talking about developing our country, energy in sustainable and reliable and competitively priced form is critical. And therefore, because we want change, we want to transform ourselves, we want our children to live good lives, the same way we are living better lives than our forefathers. So we really cannot say we are comfortable with the status quo. And that is why we must think about tomorrow.
Under the Vision 2030, we are talking about growing at 10% from 2012. We are not there yet. What you are calling surplus is not surplus. We're talking about installed capacity of about 2,300 megawatts. Yeah? If you compare countries, other countries, with the same population, yeah, as ours, even in Latin America, let's not talk about Europe. If you take, for example, Argentina, we are talking about 40,000 megawatts, same population, but because of the level of the industrial development.
In the first week of July 2018, scores of Lamu County residents held a demonstration in support of the coal power project, stating that the project will boost their local economy and solve the critical problem of youth unemployment in the county.
Lamu hakuna ajira, lakini viwanda kama hivi vikijengwa Lamu vitasomba watoto wetu wote hapo ndani.
Whereas construction is yet to begin, we travel to the project site in Kwasasi, where we meet some of the farmers from the area.
Hizo concern ambao wanaleta ni concern ambao hazina ground. Kwa sababu maisha, development yoyote ni lazima itakuwa na problem zake pia. Mshanda sana. Kama wewe unaishi Nairobi, ama tunaishi Nairobi is a big city. Kuna pollution Nairobi. Lakini everybody want to live where? Nairobi. Kila mtu anataka kwenda kufanya kazi wapi? Nairobi. Kwa sababu ya nini? Ndio mahali kuna maendeleo.
Nasir Mudhir, an elderly resident of Lamu, is among those who talk to us. He says what the residents are eager for is compensation for those who had to be relocated to pave way for the Lapsset corridor. The 975 acres of land in Kwasasi where the coal plant is to be constructed is leased from Lapsset. Nasir says what most of them are waiting for is compensation money for their livelihoods.
Tunaiomba serikali mpaka sasa ridhaa muhimu kwa muda haraka, kwa sababu tuwaumia na tuna shida kubwa sana.
Wale wakulima walioko pale waliahidiwa watapewa compensation ridhaa, na mpaka hila leo wakulima hawajapewa. Wavuvi walioko maeneo pale waliambiwa watapewa compensation, mpaka hila leo hawajapewa. Kwa hivyo wao wenyewe wametoa mwanya ili haya mazungumzo yazidi kuendelea na uvumi uzidi kuendelea.
Watu wapewe compensation ina form. Kuna mtu aweza kuwa na shamba tu, kuna mtu aweza kuwa na shamba ana na miti, kuna mtu aweza kuwa ana shamba ana na nyumba. So kufanyiwe evaluation compensation.
Joseph Kanyeri is the County Commissioner of Lamu.
The concerns of project-affected communities are looked into. Even in terms of land compensation, those that may be displaced in terms of fishing, those that may be displaced in terms of other economic pursuits, they will be catered for.
As a host community, residents are hoping that this project will change the dynamics in the area, that of unemployment and poverty.
Lakini tunaona kama huu mradi utakapokuja hapa kwetu utakuwa manufaa. Tunaweza kupata kazi kama sisi na mama wapishi, tunaweza pengine kupata mradi wa kupika. Watoto wetu ambao wako barabarani wanaranda bila kazi, wanaweza kupata kazi kwa viwanda wakafanya mabwana zetu.
We expect during the construction phase there will be approximately 3,500 to 4,000 people working on the project itself. The multiplier effect of this project is approximately 7. So in a population of Lamu County, which is over 100,000 people, just over 100,000 people, with a multiplier effect of about 7, we think that there'll be around 28 to 30,000 people that will be directly or indirectly impacted socially and economically as far as this project is concerned.
The site of construction is situated 21 kilometers from Lamu Old Town, the 16-hectare area marked as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The distance is considered long enough not to interfere with the integrity of the site. This is the site in Kwasasi set aside for the coal power plant project. Now, the conversation about the composition and economics of power generation in the country has so far received the short end of the stick. Is it time to stop and leverage how such projects are working for other countries and how much this can fuel Kenya's economic growth? Sharon Momanyi, KTN News, Kwasasi, Lamu County.